Hello everybody, my name is Kara. Today I am doing my second part of my November wrap-up. Basically for the last couple of weeks in the month where I participated in 2 readathons. The first readathon I participated in November was Contemporaryathon, and that was created by Chelsea and Julie, and I will link both of their channels down below. And then the second readathon I participated in was round 5 of Tome Topple, which was created by Sam from Thoughts on Tomes, and I will also link her channel down below. I'm also going to leave timestamps in the description box so that if you're only interested in seeing the books I read for one of the readathons, you can skip right to that part. The first book I picked up for Contemporaryathon was First and Then by Emma Mills. Now this is sort of described as Pride and Prejudice meets Friday Night Lights. I would say that the Pride and Prejudice elements are pretty loose. Like, this is definitely not a retelling of that novel. So Devon is our main character, and she sort of doesn't really know where she's going in life. She doesn't know what she wants to do after high school. She's getting ready to graduate, but she doesn't really have any interest in figuring out what she wants from life. And of course there is a boy, Ezra, who Devon starts out hating and slowly starts to get to know better. And Devon has the added unhappiness of being madly in love with her best friend, and he has absolutely no idea. For the most part, I enjoyed this book. I really liked Ezra. I was actually surprised at how much I enjoyed his character. I think that he's a really good sort of modern day equivalent of the Mr. Darcy archetype. I have to say though, I didn't really care for Devon very much. I found her kind of irritating and judgmental, and in particular there's some things that she thinks and says about her cousin Foster, the young kid who acts like he doesn't care what people think about him, but he notices when people treat him differently. And the things that Devon says to him or about him, some of them are really cruel. And although we do see Devon sort of change her mind about this later, and some other characters sort of point out problems with what she's saying about him and the way she's treating him, I don't think there was enough of that to excuse or forgive Devon for treating this little boy like that. And I also just didn't feel like Devon was a particularly interesting main character, and we really don't get to know her very well at all. So sort of by the end of the book, I understood why she liked Ezra, because I also really liked Ezra, but I had no idea why Ezra was interested in Devon, so I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I picked up was The Wrong Side of Right by Jen Marie Thorne. And in this novel, we follow our main character, Kate, who is still reeling from the death of her mother a year ago. She's living with her aunt and uncle and just trying to make it through high school as she's dealing with this crushing grief. And one day she finds out that her father, whom she's never met or even heard about, actually a conservative senator who is running for president. She is brought into their home and sort of made part of the campaign trail. And she has to come to terms with the fact that she has this whole new family that she didn't even know about, and she's not sure if she wants to be a part of it or not. And she's also trying to reconcile her beliefs with the politics and beliefs of this new family. I really enjoyed this one. One of my favorite characters of the entire novel is definitely Meg, who is Kate's stepmom, because it would have been so easy for the book to demonize her and make her like the wicked stepmother and like this villain who hates Kate just because of what she represents, this affair that her husband had years ago. And that never happens. From the moment that we meet Meg, she feels like an incredibly good person who is doing the best she can in a situation that is hard for everybody. I was also surprised at how much I liked the romantic subplot of this novel. Although it becomes important later on in the book, it doesn't I don't think it ever takes over the story. And finally, this book does not shy away from discussing some of the political and ethical issues. There's a lot of discussion of immigration and sexism and how those things relate to politics, but also how they affect people in their everyday lives. And I gave this book 4 stars. And finally, the last book I managed to pick up for the Contemporaryathon readathon was When Dimple Met Rishi by Sandhya Menon. In this book, Dimple and Rishi both find themselves at the same camp for computer programmers. And Dimple and Rishi's parents have arranged for them to meet at this camp because they are hoping to arrange the marriage between these 2 characters. Rishi knows all about this plan, and he is very traditional and very excited to Dimple and fall in love and have this perfect wedding that his parents are hoping for. Dimple, on the other hand, is not aware of this plan and has no idea that her parents are trying to set her up with Rishi. My favorite part of this book was the discussion and inclusion of Indian culture. I thought that was so interesting to see and to really get two different perspectives on that culture, because Rishi is very much grounded in that, and these cultural traditions are really important to him, whereas Dimple feels trapped by them and she is constantly trying to break out of these expectations. Unfortunately, I did not like Dimple as much as I liked Rishi, and this was mainly because Dimple was a very judgmental person, and she pretty much hated anybody who wasn't exactly like her. And there were plenty of cases where her first impressions about somebody were correct. They actually turned out to be a very selfish or rude or even cruel person. But the problem was that she didn't draw those conclusions from talking to them or meeting them. She looked at them and decided based on how they looked and all of these superficial observations, like how they dressed and what they did to their hair, that these were terrible people. That just really didn't sit right with me, because although there were a couple of times where we find out that maybe somebody she judged harshly at the beginning is actually better than we thought they were, it was never portrayed as Dimple realizing she shouldn't make snap judgments about people. It was always like the other character suddenly coming to their senses and becoming the kind of person that Dimple thinks you have to be. And she also just totally looks down on all girls who like traditionally feminine things. Like, if you wear makeup, Dimple probably already hates you. And I can definitely understand that a big part of that is because Dimple's mother was trying to force that idea of femininity on her for basically her entire life. But like I said about the snap judgment thing, we never, as the reader, we never really feel like Dimple is going to stop doing this in the future. And I gave this book 3 stars. After Contemporaryathon, I participated in round 5 of Tome Topple. And the first book I picked up for that readathon was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. I have already done a full review and rave about this book, which I will link down below. I gave this book 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I loved the characters and the writing style and the humor, and I just felt so emotionally connected to these characters. Like, I finished this book a few weeks ago now, and I'm still very much emotional over these characters. My second and final read for Tome Topple was Night Film by Marisha Pessl. So, unpopular opinion coming up, but I hated this book. I didn't like anything about it. So first off, I did not like the writing style at all. There are way too many similes and metaphors that frankly don't need to be there. They just slow down the pace of the book, which is already incredibly slow. And that doesn't sound like a big deal. I know that's kind of nitpicky, but it happened on just about every page. Scott, our main character, would be talking to somebody else, and he would say something like, "She stared at me like she was hoping to win the Olympic medal for staring contests." And obviously that particular example didn't show up in the book, but that's how unnecessary and blatant it was, and it just drove me crazy, along with the constant use of italics for things that didn't need to be italicized. Readers are smart enough to pick up on the important parts of a sentence. You don't need to italicize everything that matters so that we know it's important. And I also just hated the main character, Scott, himself. The whole book is first person from his perspective, and it was torturous because this man is the most immature, like 40-something I can imagine. He was constantly making stupid jokes when they were interrogating somebody about a murder, and he was also just the dumbest, like, newspaper reporter or investigator that I could even imagine. At one point, he and his little gang of misfits sneak into this group that they believe is incredibly dangerous and linked to the death of this girl. And he's there for like 3.5 minutes or something, and he gets caught! Like, how many times have you supposedly gone undercover and won journalism awards, and you get caught? And actually, one of his, like, amateur companions has to bail him out because he was smart enough to put on a waiter uniform, and Scott wasn't. Just all of the characters were so flat. Like, I did like Scott's 2 companions that he ends up solving the crime with marginally more than everyone else, but even they weren't enough to redeem this book. Itself was just completely unsatisfying, and although there were one or two things that I liked about the ending, it came too late. Like, maybe if it had happened 200 pages earlier, I would have cared more, but it didn't, so I didn't. Almost 600 pages, and it didn't need to be. It was so overwritten. This novel could have been like maybe 300. It could have been like half the size, and it would have been much more effective and enjoyable to read. So yeah, I gave this book 1 star, and I'm not even going to say I don't recommend this book, because like I said, every review I've ever seen of this book has been very positive. Like, people love this, so you probably would enjoy it if you picked it up. It just wasn't for me, and maybe if you get annoyed by the same things that I do, then maybe this one isn't for you either. Okay, so those are all of the books I read in the last part of November for Contemporaryathon and Tome Topple Round 5. If you guys have read any of the books I talked about, then definitely let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you soon with another one, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!